TRIBEathlon podcast, finding out how ordinary people do extraordinary things.
Trying to maintain some kind of regularity in your, in your energy output rather than just dying and hanging on.
That was Mitch Phillips, and this episode is going sub 3 with a run, walk, run strategy. So in this episode, I got the opportunity to interview Mitch Phillips, who is a sports editor at Reuters. But the reason I approached Mitch is because I listened to a podcast where he was interviewed on Marathon Talk in the lead up to running my first marathon, and that was in the lead up to my first Ironman. And I was kind of introduced to the concept of the run, walk, run strategy. And I thought it sounded like a really brilliant idea, particularly with the Ironman in mind. But what I loved about this podcast interview with Mitch was that it really kind of helped me understand that actually I'd associated the run, walk, run strategy with people that were going to do a sort of 4, 5 or even a 6-hour marathon. But Mitch had refined this down to getting to a sub 3 marathon. And it was that refining that I really wanted to kind of explore further in this podcast, because I really wanted to understand how he got to sub 3 using the run, walk, run strategy. He's got a wealth of experience in the running world, in the Ironman world, and in running ultra marathons. And he's been running for years and years and years. But he's obviously, because of his Reuters background, got a wealth of experience in the world of sport as well. So I hope you'll find this conversation as fascinating as I did, particularly on kind of understanding how we can refine that run, walk, run strategy. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to Mitch, so I hope you enjoy it. And don't forget to share your training photos on Instagram with hashtag TRIBEathlon. We just want to see as many brilliant photos of you out and about with your tribe. And I'll be picking out some photos over the course of future podcasts. This podcast is brought to you by Pip and Nut, the amazing nut butters. Created by Pip herself when she started mixing up nut butters in her kitchen in 2013. I think these nut butters are amazing. My particular favourites are the coconut almond butter, the maple peanut butter, and also the gingerbread one, which is delicious. But all of these nut butters are amazing, and what's brilliant about them is that they don't have any palm oil in as well. So delicious nut butter that you can get and check out at pipandnut.com, and if you hang on to the end of this podcast, I'll have a discount code for you too. So that's pipandnut.com for amazing nut butters. This podcast is also brought to you by the TRIBEathlon app. Now, have you ever thought, wow, wouldn't it be really cool if I could find other people that wanted to train at the same time that I could train? For example, I've got a great group of guys I cycle with on a Saturday, but I'd really love to do more of my cycling on a Friday afternoon. It just works better for my work and my family life. So what I would love is to find a group of people that can cycle with me at the same pace as me, but on a Friday afternoon. Well, the TRIBEathlon app helps you find like-minded people to train with, whether it's running, cycling, swimming, or triathlon-based events. You can find other people to train with at your pace and at your suitable time. So go to TRIBEathlon.com, download the app, and you can find people to train with to build your tribe. Like I said, I listened to this Marathon Talks podcast, and just, while I was in the lead up to the Brighton Marathon, somebody had mentioned the concept of run, walk, run. And they suggested I listen to this particular podcast where they interviewed you. And it was
just a brilliant piece of podcast stuff for me to listen to at that point in time. It really, really helped me. So Mitch, I'd like you to start off though, before we get into the whole run, walk, run stuff and your history around that, and your sub 3 hour run, walk, run marathon, which I still think is incredible. And I really want to dive into a bit more detail on that. But before we do that, tell me a bit about your story. How did you get into running and triathlons, and tell me also a bit about what you do as a day job?
Start with part 2 first. I'm sports journalist. I'm sports editor at Reuters. Have been at Reuters for 22 years or so. Been a sports journalist, or a journalist most of my life. So I kind of cover international sport. At the moment, my role is kind of planning it, covering, and but I get out to lots of juicy events, lots of World Cups and Olympic and World Championships, and they're the highlight parts, and the more routine parts of sending emails to people, everyone else, saying do this, do that. But so yeah, always been involved in sport, work-wise. Activity-wise, reasonable runner at school, kind of, county-ish, nothing special. My dad was a decent runner. He was All England 800 metres, second place twice. So I had a bit of some genes in there, but I kind of played football most of my life. That was my main sport. I always liked running, but never really got much beyond county-wise. And then as football started to ease off, I got more into running, having run more as a fitness aid, and then got into triathlon in the mid-90s, and got into triathlon for quite a few years. Did my first Ironman in '99 in Roth. Yeah.
And how long after getting into triathlon did you go up to Ironman? Was it fairly quick?
It was quite quick, actually. I mean, I started in 90. I think I did my first sprint in 96. I think it was the only one that year, on the Thames Turbo races down in London at Hampton Pool, which are brilliant beginner events, super sprints they are. And then a couple of years, and then Ironman in '99. So kind of a couple of years really. I hadn't done that many Olympic distance. I hadn't done a half or anything. Went straight into, I thought I might as well crack straight on and just into Ironman. That wasn't official Ironman Europe then. It became a challenge event. And then at the time it was Ironman, but it was relatively obscure event still then. Most people knew about Hawaii and not much else. It wasn't a well-known sport in this country. I didn't know anyone else who did it really.
And so what made you want to do it then, if you didn't know anybody else that was doing it?
I can't really remember. I mean, I think I was always a terrible swimmer. I always fancied it. I fancied it for years, but I was such a terrible swimmer. It really put me. I mean terrible. I'm kind of comes out and all the bikes are gone. So it really put me off trying it. Probably for 5 or 6 years, I just thought there's no point. I can't swim. And this event was like a 400-meter pooled swim. I thought, well, how hard can it be? So I kind of like splashed and breaststroked my way up and down that. And then I got some lessons in some decent swimming lessons and became competent. I was still relatively useless, but I wasn't destroyed. I just quite liked the idea of it. Maybe it was from a lifetime of being kind of okay at lots of sports, but not supreme at any. I thought, this is a good event where you can be okay again at all 3 sports. And then I quickly realised that some people are very good at all 3. It's just a good fun thing, and then you get to know people through it, and it becomes a big part of your life.
And how many Ironmans did you go on to do?
I didn't do another one for 10 years. I managed to say that will do, and then I did another one. I did 3 in all. I did Barcelona, which was also a challenge event, in 2009, and then Copenhagen in 2011.
And which was your favourite?
Barcelona was fantastic because I went with the club, Thames Turbo, and we took about 40 people. And it was just a brilliant, fun weekend, which is really applicable for your site, really, how much more pleasure you get from it, doing it with friends. And we ranged from really, top-level Olympic rowers doing, 9 hours up to guys hoping to crack 15. And everyone was in it together, and all stayed in the same hotel. So it's just a really, really good fun experience doing it as a group. In Copenhagen, I liked because I that was my fastest time. And I kind of felt like I trained properly for it. The first one was this kind of voyage of discovery, and the time was irrelevant. It was just fun to try and do this crazy thing. But it's such a great event with that tunnel, and I mean, even back then it was huge, and it's become super huge now and famous for being such a fast course. But it was just a really fun event to see all these locals coming. And also, one great thing about Roth is they do this local stay system where not everybody, but the vast majority of people stay with local families.
Oh, brilliant.
So they really, the community really embrace the race. It's really nice.
Fantastic. And what was your fastest time? You said in Copenhagen that was your fastest.
Yeah, I think it was 10:40. 10:40. I'd have to check it. Something like that.
And then, so did marathons? Did you kind of focus more on marathons and running after that, or was it in between those? When did you kind of switch?
Yeah, I think I did a few Londons. I did London before Barcelona, more as a sort of training race of Barcelona, and that's when I first tried run walk, and then as I kind of came out of triathlons, I kind of stuck with marathons, and easier to train for and to do. So I've done a marathon probably most years, last 7 or 8 years, maybe just one, maybe 2 a year, one most years.
Right. Oh, okay. Fantastic. And your fastest marathon to date? I know that you've done a sub-3 using run.
Yeah, I did that sub-3. It was 2:58:33 in Hull.
Brilliant. And that's still your fastest?
2015. Yeah. I won't be getting any faster. I can guarantee that.
So, but you can plan to continue doing them, do you?
Yeah, I was supposed to do it in London this year. That fell apart.
Are you going to do it in October when they've rescheduled?
Yeah, but it won't happen.
No, I think you're probably right.
I think mass events are the very last things to come back, so unfortunately. But I'm actually getting a bit more into ultras now. I did my first official ultra last year, which was 50k, but that counts. Anything over marathons an ultra. So that was an off-road one, and that's kind of what I'm enjoying at the moment. I mean, I run off-road most of the time anyway, in Richmond Park and stuff, but that was a beautiful race called the Serpent Trail down in Hampshire around Petersfield Way. And that's kind of my motivation now, that kind of off-road running.
There seems to be a rise of the ultra runners, to coin a book title, but it's it just seems to be the next thing. It's kind of like it seems to be really growing in popularity, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's definitely on the list, and I think it's following that same kind of path. Marathons became huge, and then triathlon became a thing, and then Ironman became a thing, and not everyone, but people are sort of striving for that next step. And I'm the same. I'm thinking, well, I've done 50k. Well, now I need to do 50 miles now, or if I do, I've got to do 100 miles. You're always looking for something else to challenge you. And I know it's kind of normal when people are doing it. It doesn't make the marathon any easier, but it just makes, as you get older, going longer and slower is slightly more appealing than running on the edge of pain for 3 hours. Not on the edge of pain, on the wrong side of pain.
Yeah. So then that brings me nicely onto this whole run, walk, run strategy, because I would imagine that works even better for ultras. But how did you find out about the run, walk, run strategy? Well,
it's another good example of the benefit of being in a club, actually, because it was when we were building up for that first Ironman. We went out for dinner, my club at Thames Turbo, and one of the guys there just told me about Galloway and his method. I'd never heard of him, even though he's an Olympian, or the method, and kind of looked it up. He's written 5 or 6 books, I think, basically on the subject.
About 30 apparently now. Apparently 30, I think.
Oh, really? Well, that's cashing in on a simple idea. But so I went away and looked at that, and I thought, well, that makes some sense, and kind of tried it out at that London Marathon that year, and sort of seemed to work, and I didn't destroy myself. It was okay.
And then how did it work for you in the Ironman?
Well, perfectly, really. I think one of the things about it is that people do it anyway without realizing it. They do it accidentally. One of the things about run walk is that some people criticize, and you say, have you ever watched a marathon? You see a lot of people walking at the end. You see a lot of people walking at aid stations, and in an Ironman particularly, people are walking all the time. They're walking up hills and all sorts. So it really lends itself to an Ironman marathon leg when you're already a bit tired. you're not trying to do some spectacular time. Usually you're kind of, a lot of people are just sort of surviving and almost from the start. So it's a question of trying to maintain some kind of regularity in your, in your energy output, rather than just dying and hanging on. You want to enjoy it, don't you? You want to enjoy the day to a certain extent, right? You don't want to be destroyed. You're going to feel terrible enough anyway, so you might as well sort of, do it progressively.
And so how did the run, walk, run strategy work for you at the start, and how did it evolve over time?
The method I used at the start, or the ratio I used, was, I think, 9-minute run, 1-minute walk. And that was a kind of Galloway kind of advice as a general, for an experienced runner. I mean, he advises people using it, very novice runners, and he advised sort of 3-minute run, 1-minute walk kind of thing. But I was an experienced runner by then, and it works on a couple of levels. Ideally, you get, for me particularly, there's two things you get. You get the physiological rest. You get a little break in your quads and your calves, particularly in some of those big muscles that are tightening up. Even though it's a minute, that gives you a fair bit of rest. Which is why you need to do it from the start and not kind of wait till you're tired. You do it after 9 minutes and start. And then the psychological aspect of it, which I really liked, is that you break the race down into chunks, just like in triathlon, where you break it down into each leg. You're not looking ahead. Same thing with this. You're thinking, I've got 7 more minutes and I've got a break, 4 minutes and I can have a break. And the break in itself doesn't necessarily need to be a big rest, but it's just that, okay, have a breath, and maybe take a gel, have a drink of water, wring your hat out if it's a hot day, or tuck your shirt in or something, and it's just that mental. I just find that a nice way to run. Some people don't. A lot of people just want to run smoothly, and the idea of stopping and starting is horrific to them. But I quite like, and you practice it in training, and becomes normal.
I think that, I've thought about this a bit, particularly recently, and I think in a way, yes, I absolutely get the physical benefits of it. You're helping you're resting some of the key muscles, because you're using different muscles to walk than you are to run. You're reducing your risk of injury. So the physical aspects I get are really important, and the ability to then maintain a steady pace throughout, I've found to be really brilliant. But I think the mental side of it is far greater than the physical side. That, particularly in the Ironman, it was quite funny actually. The first few miles, I nearly kind of missed my walk, kind of bounding away. I was full of enthusiasm. By the end, literally I was looking at my watch every minute, but I was only thinking, it's now only 7 minutes, now only 6 minutes.
You're not thinking it's only 3 hours to go, are you?
Yeah, exactly. And it just made such a difference. And I think that's a bigger factor, is the mental piece. And breaking it down into chunks makes such a big difference.
Yeah, I certainly kind of thought that. And even as I got faster and I adjusted the ratios to the point where when I did the sub-3, I was walking for, I think by then I changed it to, I've been through a few ideas, and I think by then I was doing 9 or 10 minute runs and 20-second walks. So the walk in itself, you can't be getting much rest from 20 seconds, but it's just enough to give you that mental break, and just take a little bit of pressure off your quads for a few steps.
How did you refine it to that? So when you went from 9 minutes running and 1 minute of walking, how did you end up working out the 10 minutes of running and 20 seconds of
It was kind of refined for me by a couple of near misses. I had 2 very near misses at London. I did 3 hours, 7 seconds, and that was a bit uncomfortable. And then the following year, having learned from my mistake, I did 3 hours, 21 seconds. Both times doing the walk run. What I decided was, I thought I didn't need to walk for so long. And also, of course, you've got to run fast. I mean, the key is if you're doing a sub-3, basically your run pace is whatever it is, 6:52. If you're going to walk for a minute, you'll run the 9 minutes you're running, you're doing 6:40 or something, which is quite hard. It's quite a big jump. And I found that pace quite hard to hold. And I also thought, do I need to walk for a minute to get the benefits? The mental benefit, no, I could get that from half a minute. Physically, well, I'll probably, I'll lose a little bit of benefit, but I'm losing a lot of time. So I think the next year, I just trimmed it to something like 40 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that, what it was, or 7 minutes and whatever it was. I changed the ratio around a bit and got close. And then by then I thought, well, I keep missing it. I'm going to try a bit more radical, just keep the walk really short, 20 seconds, just enough to give me a little break, but it won't slow me down so much that I could still run something like whatever I needed to run then, 3:49s or something, a pace I was more able to keep up, I think. So yeah, I mean, it's trial and error really I did it over 4 or 5 years, 4, 5, 6 years.
So a few things that come out of that. One is, and I know this from another podcast, on the Marathon Talks one, I'm willing to bet that you had a lot of grief from your friends when you were coming in at 3 hours and 21 seconds or 3 hours and 7 seconds. For goodness sake, man, just walk less or don't walk at all and you'll do your sub 3.
Yeah, exactly. That's the never-ending conundrum, isn't it? If you hadn't walked, you'd have gone faster. And I said, well, maybe I would, or maybe I would have, got cramp and fallen over and done 4 hours. What I can say is that on one of those races, I think I get the two mixed up in the painful memories, but I think the second one, I got a bit mixed up, as you do when your brain turns to mush towards the end of the marathon on my timings, and I kind of lost my pace a bit, and I sort of mentally decided, well, I'm not going to do sub 3 now. I've done a couple of slow miles around about 18 or 19 or something, and the pace was slipping, and I thought, there's no way I can do this, so I sort of gave up and slowed down. And I did a couple of slow miles. And then I kind of, by about 22 miles, I sort of thought, how well, actually not that far off. I sort of recovered a bit. And I really pushed the end. And I did the last 5K in like sub 20 minutes and was really powering through. And that's the other benefit you get from it. You pass a lot of people. You get a mental lift. You finish strong, and you're passing all the people who are getting cramp and falling over, because in theory you're finishing quite strong, which is it's always easy. It's always a nice thing to be overtaking people rather than being overtaken. So then I kind of worked out from that. It did still work. I just needed to fine tune it. System. I had faith in the system. But yeah, mates were saying, well, that's not even it's not even a run. You can't say you run the marathon, this kind of stuff. It's cheating. You've got to run all the way. But I mean, I've never bothered with that. And if you look at ultra runners and stuff now, it's absolutely normal and encouraged to walk hills. No one considers it sort of poor form or not quite cricket to outrageously walk part of the event.
Well, and there is a stigma around it, isn't it? I mean, I was chatting to somebody. I was supposed to be running London Marathon as well this year for Sparks, the charity. And I was at a Sparks event back in kind of January, I think it was. And I was chatting to this lady that had done a couple of ultras. She'd done a couple of marathons. And I think her fastest marathon was maybe 4.5 hours. I think she wanted to go sub 4. And I said, you want to look into this whole run, walk, run strategy. She said, no. I've done ultras. I can run for the full 26 miles. And I was trying to explain to her that no, this wasn't that I was debating what the capability to do it. It was that actually I believed that it might get her there faster. And certainly Jeff Galloway reckons that it takes about 13 minutes off a kind of an average runner's time by switching to the run, walk, run strategy. And in fact, he's refined it a little bit now. So he's, from what I understand of more recent stuff, he's shortening the walk piece like you did actually, down to sort of 20, 30, 40 seconds. He doesn't need as long as a minute.
Right, yeah. Actually, I mean, that was another thing. He also has different suggests different ratios for different ages. I was 53 when I did that sub 3, and he sort of said, I kind of went back to him and I had a chat with him, and he said that we're finding some success with shorter breaks for, masters runners, as we like to call ourselves. But some people, the challenge is to run all the way, and that's fine. I mean, it might take them 5 or 6 hours. might not necessarily be the most efficient way, but that's their challenge. I mean, generally, not many people are doing it for sort of sub-3 type times, partly because if you're doing a 4-hour marathon and you what's that, 8-minute miles, and you want to walk run, you might have to do the run part at, say, whatever, 7:50 or something. It's not a massive leap. Whereas a leap from 6:50 when you're already, if you're sort of standard sort of club runner to 6:40 is quite a big step. So it didn't necessarily lend itself to the faster end. Just about worked for me.
When you played around with all these times, different splits on it, how did you keep track of it? I mean, I have a run strategy on my Garmin, and yet I find that if it's not 9 minutes and if it's not divisible by 10, I quite often miss the buzz. So then if I'm looking down, if it's not divisible by 10, I've no idea where I am. So how did you keep track?
It was pre-Garmin. It was old school watch. Although I had a Garmin on the later ones, but it was quite a basic one that just had an average time. I didn't bother with buzzes. It wasn't absolutely scientific, I didn't beat myself up over it. It was kind of roughly 7 minutes. And if I got to a point where there wasn't a convenient, easy stop, or it was a hill, I did 8 minutes. I didn't care. I wasn't kind of thinking, I must stop. As long as I was doing roughly 21, if one was a bit shorter and one was a bit longer, I didn't care that much. But I would say if you are new to it and you've got the technology to set those timers, then I would definitely try to use that, because your brain does turn to mush when you're doing these races, and you just can't make any calculation. Hang on, 10 minutes to go, 10 minutes a mile. That means you just can't do it.
The next walk section's already come round before you've done the maths.
Yeah, you just can't do it. So any external technological help to take any thinking out of the process, I would definitely recommend.
Well, the Garmin, you can set up a run, walk, run strategy on it so that it will buzz after 9 minutes and then buzz again after, and it will literally say run now or walk now.
Yeah.
Miss them.
I would definitely try to use that if you could.
Yeah. So I kind of worked out that if it's divisible by 10, it's easier, because then when I've missed it, I can look down and go, well, okay, I know I've been running for 42 minutes. I missed the 40-minute break.
Yeah.
Okay, I now know roughly where I've got to catch up.
Yeah. Definitely, the easier you can make it, the better it is. Yeah, 7s and 20s. I think one year I had 7 minutes and 30 seconds, something that was getting complicated after a while. Yeah,
I would imagine.
But it sometimes lends itself to a per mile run there. You might just say, okay, well, I'm going to do 20 seconds per mile, and I'll run at every mile stop, that kind of stuff.
Well, I could see that working actually. Yeah, I could see that.
If your mile times roughly work with that.
And the final thing on run, walk, run, I think, because it might set off something else, but the biggest challenge for me, I think, is the kind of social element of it.
Yeah.
The fact that you I'm not as fast a runner as you, so I set off in the 4-hour marathon group expected time, at Brighton, and then literally 9 minutes into that, I'm starting to walk. And everyone's kind of around and going, who's this muppet here? He's got absolutely come on, mate, you can do it type thing. How did you get over
funny.
that?
I mean, I had exactly the same. And the first time I did it at London, I was on the green start, which is quite a small start. I was in media and celebs, and quite a few, it's not many people come out. So you're already kind of quite strung out. And I pulled over to the side of the road, started walking, and everyone's going, "Oh, you're right, mate. You're okay. You can do it." And well, I know I can do it. And you feel like you want to explain to them. You do understand what I'm doing here. But after a few miles, you kind of get in your own little zone, and you kind of look ahead, or you sometimes, I'm not going to walk past this. I'm not going to walk across Tower Bridge, but I might walk when I get around the corner.
Yeah.
And then once you've done it a couple of times, or once or twice, you don't care about it, to be honest. It's doing it for anyone else's benefit.
I just took to staring at my watch, kind of hope that
look what I'm doing.
Something. There is some strategy in it. And then I thought about getting a T-shirt that sort of said that, running walking is part
No,
of the
it is difficult. It shouldn't be, but it kind of is. And people pat you on the back. And then you got the other aspect of that is that you pass the same people lots of times. When I first did it, one of my friends was a journalist, was running. We were both running around the same kind of time, and I would stop and he would disappear up the road. And then as I was then running faster than him, and I'd then come past him, and then he'd go, okay. And then a few minutes later, I'd stop and he'd come past me again. and he's getting a bit sick of it. And then after a certain time, you're ahead. But not everybody enjoys that as you come past me. They're thinking, look, if you want to come past me, come past me. Well, I have, but I'm just stopping now. And they think you're sort of taking the piss a bit. But that's also a little bit weird. But yeah, it's a good system.
Yeah. It is a strange concept, and particularly at the start of the marathon, it mentally was really difficult. I don't think I could quite last the full minute for the first 2 or 3 because.
Well, look, one of the most important things that new runners get, things that most new runners get wrong in a marathon is going off too hard, isn't it? You know, it's the most common advice to give that you would give any new marathon runner, and this is a guaranteed way of making sure you don't do that, because you will do, if the worst comes to the worst and you bomb out and do your first mile too hard, you're then going to have a stop, and then you're going to have a break, and you've got a chance to think about it, and you think, hang on, I was supposed to be doing 8-minute miles and I've just done a mile and a half in 8 and a bit. Whew, settle down, and the only damage you've done is 1 mile. Lots of people can destroy their race after 20 minutes, 30 minutes of going too hard. So it's a built-in break, really. It's a built-in sensibleness.
Well, I've been putting some thought into this, and I think you're absolutely right. It's a bit about reflection on what's happened so far. It's a bit about reducing risk of injury. It's certainly about re-energizing, and it's just kind of like I just think it's such a powerful strategy that I'm surprised more people don't embrace.
No, I'm surprised more people don't, because people do a lot of it without realizing. Like we said, lots of people walk at aid stations. They'll slow down to have a gel or a drink,
and walking at the end in particular.
Yeah, exactly. So you can incorporate those things. I mean, I tend to not bother with gels and things much anymore, but in sort of early days when I was having, maybe like 5 or 6 in a race or something, that's everyone used to in those days. You'd take a gel or a drink during that walk, so you're not particularly wasting time. And then you get to the aid station, you just hang on through because you don't need to stop.
Well, I found that, I don't know if you had them, the little Cliff energy blocks.
Oh yeah, I quite like those. Yeah.
Pop one of those every walk, and it's like a little treat every walk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's all a mental treat, isn't it? You get the break as a treat, the food's a treat. Everything is a kind of a little reward for that effort you've just put out. Yeah.
So it's just touching on nutrition then. In that case, if you said that you used to have 5 or 6 gels on a run, particularly now that you're getting into ultras, what nutrition do you tend to have nowadays?
Well, I've only done 1 ultra, so I would be reluctant to advise people too much on ultra running, and it's only a 50k. But when I did my sub 3, I had 2 gels, I think, and a bit of water, and the whole thing. I never have any gels or energy drinks or food when I'm training. I don't do much fasted training, but I've done a couple, but I just run off a banana or breakfast, whatever. So I really try to avoid all those things. And to be honest, I think even the 2 I had were just a kind of a bit of a treat. I don't think I really necessarily needed them. So I've cut right back on that. And there's a big sort of movement away from that anyway, I think now, from gel belts with 16 gels around them like a tequila girl in a bar. Slamming them down, you used to have one every 20 minutes, they say on the paper. I mean, there's a lot of kickback against that, I think, in the sort of running world now generally. And I certainly didn't suffer from not having it. I think a couple fine.
Yeah, I think that certainly I have to treat gels with a lot of caution. My digestive system isn't a big fan of them. So some of the, I found that the Vela Forte ones, which are much higher quality, much more expensive as well, but they seem to be okay. But yeah, my only threat to not finishing the Ironman was my stomach after having gels, and I'm convinced.
Yeah, well, and stomach problems ruin a lot of people's races. My first marathon in 1990, I had terrible stomach trouble trying out a new product at the time, and I was sick after, I don't know, 4 or 5 miles or something, and I'd gone into that race in great shape, and I had a terrible race. And that was a long time ago, and before gels, it was some kind of mixed up powder goo that was pretty disgusting. But yeah, people do, certainly on long races. I mean, what a way to ruin a race by having stomach problems after all that training and then feeling sick. It's terrible.
Well, a friend of mine, a guy I train with regularly, has, other than I think his first Ironman, he finished in pretty much bang on 11 hours. And then every one since, he has, I think I'm right in saying, has had to pack up because of stomach problems one way or another. He just can't.
That's awful.
Can't
so
keep
frustrating.
down. Yeah.
Frustrating.
And yet, then you hear about these ultra runners who will literally, some of them eat pizza while they're running. You think that's a slightly different approach.
Yeah. Well, when I did my ultra last year, it was a really hot day. It was in July. It was absolutely boiling, and they had some great aid stations, and I just started yearning for watermelon, which they had. And I was getting to these aid stations and just taking these enormous pieces of watermelon and just kind of burying my face in. And again, it was a kind of mental thing as much as anything. And that watery goo, and then lemon. But I think I spent about 5 minutes in one at the end just eating this huge fruit salad and stuff. But yeah, you're right, lots of ultra runners eat savoury stuff and potatoes and salty stuff. And I think they generally, I mean, the longer they go, they generally just say, eat whatever your body tells you you need. But most marathons, you won't want that. But yeah, and most triathlons, Ironman events aren't going to have big loaded aid stations with a whole bunch of savoury food. But I think I would definitely advise people to try to avoid just surviving off gels for 15 hours. Not many people's stomachs can handle that.
No, I think that at least the energy bars, the higher quality ones, at least they're proper, kind of, they've got some substance to them, whereas the gels just they don't agree with me anyway. So if run, walk, run strategies was one of the best pieces of advice you ever got, what's some of the worst advice you've ever got, and where did it come from?
Worst advice. The advice that annoys me most of all in triathlon and running is usually manufacturer led. This whole idea that you throw your shoes out after 400 miles, that you have to have a 70 pounds t-shirt. I mean, when I used to read 220 magazine, it used to drive me insane looking at their reviews. His 7 running t-shirts, and the bargain one would be 60 quid. And I think, hang on a minute, that's a t-shirt. A bargain t-shirt is a £5. So that whole kind of push that you must have all the gear, and especially in triathlon, there's a lot of snobbishness as well with bike levels and things. So advice that you need all that gear is poor advice. You can have a really good fun triathlon on a cheap second-hand bike and cheap kit, and the idea of throwing out a pair of £100 running shoes after 400 miles is absolutely ludicrous.
So how far would you run in your running shoes then?
I would have no clue, but many times more than the manufacturer recommends. I tend to have 3 or 4 on the go at any one time. So I've got shoes that I've had 4 or 5 years. I'm kind of, trail shoes that I might not wear for 6 months. Road shoes that I kind of just wear for long runs, and I tend to mix them up, so I don't wear the same shoes regularly very often. I've got shoes that I would be pretty sure have done thousands of miles, and I've had injuries. I don't think I'm kind of injury free, and people say, "Oh, that's why I've had injuries." But I mean, I don't think they're shoe related. I wear different shoes. I just think it's a big manufacturing
marketing ploy.
Yeah.
It's like the was it Vidal Sassoon or no? Wash. I can't remember which famous shampoo it was, but they said rinse and repeat. That one mile exercise doubled their sales.
Yeah, exactly.
Twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good piece of marketing genius, that is.
Yeah, and the other one that kind of annoys me slightly is the idea of junk miles. I kind of get it. It all depends on what you're trying to achieve. But for most people, going for a run is a good thing. And I get it that lots of people do lots of unstructured running, lots of running too much at the same pace. But I just, and I get it, I junk miles, do your fast miles fast and your slow miles slow. Lots of people do too much in the middle, but it's still a run, and it's still better than sitting on the sofa, and it all helps in my time concern.
I'm glad you say that, because I haven't really torn by that whole junk miles thing. I want to train to get faster at things like the Ironman, but actually, the reason I'm doing the Ironman is to motivate me to go out and do the training, and it's the training that should be the priority. The Ironman is just the kind of reward, the cherry on the cake.
Yeah.
So actually, junk miles, if you're going out running in the countryside and you're doing it in a way that's good for your mental well-being and that you're enjoying it, I certainly don't beat myself up about it. I know that I don't run in the most structured way in my training, but I run in the way that's good for me.
But I think it's a misconception of what it means as well. I think people, I do lots and lots of very slow running now. I do most of my running, relative to my race pace. Most of my long runs now, I run round about 9.5 minute pace. Relaxed, slow pace, sometimes slower, stop and, smell the roses. And then I'll do park run, or I'll occasionally do, tempo run. If I'm in training, I'll be doing tempo runs, whatever. But most of my running is really slow. Junk miles to me it's a bit that you do all your mileage, a little bit too fast, but you don't do a huge amount of kind of really high-end work. So as far as achieving progress, in your training or your time, it's a junk mile, and it's not necessarily structured. But I don't really like the concept. As you said, you're doing a marathon one day a year, or an Ironman one day a year, and you're training 300 odd days a year. So you might as well enjoy the training. And that's why, just run slow and enjoy the running, and then do some hard stuff at the other end. Do that 80-20 training. Another one of those guidebooks. Matt Fitzgerald, I think 80-20 training was quite a good one. As long as you do your hard stuff hard and your slow stuff slow. That's why park run's so good. That looks after some hard stuff without having to think about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you mentioned right at the start the importance of having other people to train with. Obviously, this is a big part of what TRIBEathlon is about. It's about helping people find other people to train with, but helping to also understand which of your mates are competing in particular events, because we all know it's far more fun to compete in an event, as you said in Barcelona, where you've got other friends doing it. How did you meet all of your training tribe? Who do you train with, and how did you meet them all?
Mostly through a club, and actually it's interesting you say that, because I wasn't in a club for a long time, and as I said at the start, I didn't really know many people or anyone who did triathlon. I was kind of a solo, and I was reading in the magazines, oh, it's great, I made all these great friends from triathlon. I'm thinking, actually, I haven't really done that yet. What's going on? You talk to people at the events, and it was a fun day, but I didn't have sort of mates in the race. And then a friend I did know, not through triathlon, through something else, who I bumped into at a race, said, we were talking afterwards. He said, you should just join a club. It's so great. And I hadn't joined the club mostly because of my work, because of sports journalist, and I worked most weekends. Most of the club stuff, the club bikes were always on Sundays, and that kind of, it just didn't really fit in with my life. And I didn't really want to go and swim twice a week. So I had loads of reasons why I didn't want to join a club. But then I did, and I joined Thames Turbo, and they were fantastic. Great club, really good range again, from top quality to fun guys, really good youth section, and just got to know people there, and the motivation. And that's why I did Barcelona. I was talking to one of the guys and said, well, a few of us are talking about doing Barcelona next year. You fancy it? And I thought, well, that sounds fun. And then a really good training group got together, been stayed together, and we're all sort of friends ever since, really. We did it again in Copenhagen a couple of years later, went out with wives and partners, even bigger group. Half of those guys, their children are in the club now as adults. So, it was really, really, it was a big change for me. I'd always played, team games, football particularly, but running-wise, it's always been quite a solitary affair for me, and it still is, to be honest. Running mostly is just because of the practicality of it, but being part of that club for those few years was really, really good fun and very motivating.
And I think, and that's kind of where TRIBEathlon was born out of, actually, because I had a very similar experience. I was cycling for about 3 years and and I'd kind of find the odd friend that cycle when I do, maybe once a year I'd do a sportif and I'd cycle with some friends. But other than that, it was all fairly solitary for me. And it took me a long time to get into a crowd of people. And then I started getting into triathlons, and it was exactly the same. And, I'd have been cycling for 3 years, and suddenly there'd be this big big cycling sportif going past my doorstep. And I'm thinking, how do I not even know this exists? Past my door. It feels like this, it feels like these series of doors. You open a door after you've been cycling for a year and you find, oh, there's a few people in here. And then you open another door a year later, and then you start triathlons and you find the same thing all over again. And it takes you quite a while to build a tribe.
Yeah. And they're all out there, there's so many running clubs particularly, and there's tri clubs dotted around now, hundreds of cycling clubs. And people sometimes think, they're not welcoming. In my experience, they're all very welcoming. They all want members. They're not, very few of these clubs are, geared to top end anyway. They're accommodating for all levels. And, of course, a certain amount of trepidation when you turn up and say, hi, you don't know me, I'd like to join your club. I would estimate that would probably last 5 minutes in any club. They always make you feel welcome.
I think that's what's so fascinating. I think that once you get into these bubbles, you realise they're incredibly welcoming. It's finding the bubbles in the first place. I found, I've been, as I said, cycling for 6 years, doing triathlon for 3 years, and I literally a month ago, when I was interviewing somebody for my financial planning business, I discovered that there's a triathlon club in the town where my office is, where my business is based. And I didn't know. I knew there was one other in the county somewhere else, but it's like it's another door. So I've got to open that door to find out who's in there. But I find it incredible.
It's another step. It's like any slightly awkward situation. If you don't know anyone in the club, it's not the easiest thing, is it, to just walk up and say, "Hi, my name's John. I like triathlon. Can I join, please?" But in fact, that's all you ever need to do.
Yeah.
And someone will say, "Hey, sure, yeah, where do you live? What races have you done? What do you want to do?" And off you go. And no one's judging you. No one's kind of, it's £300, please. It's just making that first step, and it's a very easy first step.
Well, it is when you find
it took a long time to do it as well. I was doing triathlon for a long time before I joined the club, and it massively enhanced my enjoyment of the sport once I joined.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, well, that's fantastic. So are there any books that you particularly recommend, any books that you regularly gift, or anything else along those lines that you think has really helped you?
I've read so many that they all tend to blur into each other. And I can remember which ones are which. Matt Fitzgerald I like as a very accessible author. He's written about 20 or 30, and I think I'm getting it right. In fact, I'll look here. He's done a couple of Brain Training for Runners is one book that he's done, which is very good on the mental aspect of running. And 80-20 training, which is what we were talking about before, kind of encouraging people that slow running is okay, as long as you do some fast stuff. I'm kind of becoming a bit more aware now of the physiology of it all, and being I'm looking after your body a bit, and reading a bit more about how to prevent injury and recognize what you're doing wrong in your gait, that kind of stuff. As you get older and a bit more battered, you need to read a few more of those things. And then my favorite running book of all time, and probably my favorite sports book of all time, is Feet in the Clouds.
Feet in the Clouds. Oh, okay.
You don't know that book?
No.
Oh man, you got a treat.
I want to track that down immediately.
It's all about fell running, and the Bob Graham Round, which is this kind of 24-hour challenge of running whatever it is, 42 peaks in 24 hours, and some mad challenge. But it's the story of this guy who lives in London, actually. He's a journalist, and his kind of discovery of fell running. And the book itself is his personal story linked in with the history of fell running, and these incredible, extraordinary athletes that no one's ever heard of, just so good. I'm pleased you haven't read it, because anyone who's not read it, I always get very excited to tell them about it, because I guarantee without fear that you will enjoy it.
Brilliant. Well, I shall add that to my So I listen to my books while I'm running and cycling, and that'll be
Yeah, I do.
my running
I
book
do.
at the moment is Rise of the Ultra Runners by Adharahan Finn.
Ah, you did well to say that. Well, you said
Yeah,
that.
it's just about. I think I just about got it out there. I think I sort of stumbled enough to get away with it anyway. But yeah, and that and his book Running with the Kenyans I've really enjoyed. But that Feet in the Clouds will be
I haven't read his Ultra yet, but it's on the list.
Yeah, no, it's very, very good. And I suppose the last question: what are you most excited about now? What is there something on the horizon? What are you going to train for?
My big challenge, my big interest now is ultras and off-road ultras. So I've got a couple. I'm on road because I still want to do Comrades. That's on my list.
Brilliant. That's in Rise of the Ultras as well.
Yeah, is it? Yeah, I'm sure. And I know quite a few friends. I've been to South Africa a few times. I've watched it. I've been there.
Fantastic.
As a fan, and it was fantastic when I was over there on a rugby trip. And a few friends have done it, so I definitely want to do that. But my kind of more accessible stuff is to do sort of long off-road runs. So I'd like to do a 50 miler this year, and then the long-term goal is to get a 100 miler at some point, and that will be a lot of walking and not so much running.
Is that, I was going to say that walk strategy is that?
Yeah, the ratios might be about 50-50 by then, but I really enjoy off-road running, and that my first taste of it as a race last year, that Serpent Trail 50k was really good fun. It was boiling hot. Kind of pounding the pavements doesn't really do me. I mean, I do most of my training's off-road anyway. Triathlon wise, I think I'm done. I'm not sure. Because I commute to work 15 miles each way, so I'm going to normally get 90, 100 miles or so. And I keep thinking, well, I've got this running and cycling fitness. It's a bit of a shame to waste it. So I've got to enter one, even though I hate swimming. And 3 times I've entered the Outlaw over the last 7 or 8 years. And 3 times I've had to pull out twice through injury and once through work. And then I kind of did have a bit of a chat with myself and said, why are you doing this? Just because you feel like you've got another Ironman in you. But do you actually want to do it? It's quite hard. You have to sometimes sit back and think, why are you doing a race? I'm like, I absolutely hate swimming. I haven't been in a pool for literally years. I don't know how many years. Do I want to start spending my evenings training swimming again? Just because I think I've got a bit of cycling fitness. But, I think once a triathlete, always a triathlete. It's all in there. I've still got the kit. The tri-bike is still in the shed. I've still got the wetsuit. So, yeah, there probably will be another one in there. But whether it's an Ironman or not, I don't know. But I'm enjoying running. I've been relatively injury-free for a couple of years. That's the other big thing now, is to just try, recognise injuries when they're coming, or see them off. So, staying fit, running, and being able to keep running is the challenge, I guess.
I'm sure you'll agree there's a lot to be learned from that conversation with Mitch, and particularly about how he refined those times for the run, walk, run strategy, getting the optimum splits to get him eventually under the 3-hour mark, although it took a few attempts to get there, didn't it? Anyway, genuinely lovely guy, and I hope you took a lot from that conversation. And don't forget to share those photos with #TRIBEathlon. I'll be looking out for them. This podcast was brought to you by pipandnut.com, delicious nut butters that you can find at pipandnut.com. And if you use the discount code TRIBEathlon15, it's TRIBEathlon15, you'll get a 15% discount on your first order. So go check it out. As I say, my particular favourite is the coconut almond butter. Enjoy at pipandnut.com.
And don't forget to download the TRIBEathlon app for more amazing podcasts, but also to help you train, compete, and to build your tribe.